Before you buy another card making tool, watch this. If you're a beginner who loves clean stamping, detailed die cutting, layered cards, foiling, embossing, or interactive designs, it's so easy to feel like you need everything. The truth is, you don't, because supplies are expensive. In this video, I'm breaking down exactly which tools make sense for each style and be very candid about which ones you can confidently skip. Let's dive in. As card makers, we obviously use multiple techniques in every project, but we gravitate towards a couple more than others. So let's start with stamping, which I consider to be the most foundational technique in card making. I've picked out a few cards to show you that demonstrate the tools I used. This first one is a flat one-layered card. It's just stamping and stenciling. I stamped both the sentiment and the design. This one here, I used a small stamp to create the background. Then I created some embossing by stacking die cuts and running them through my machine. This one is another stamped card, but I heat embossed the sentiment to create the background. And this one is an example of both a stamped card and an interactive card. I stamped this design here, and yes, I was holding it upside down and wondering why it opened the wrong way. Now, for this card and this card, I had to use my stamp positioning tool, without which I wouldn't have been able to get the crisp outline you see here. I use a MISTI, but any stamp positioning tool will work, of course. I had to stamp this image multiple times since I was stamping on dark cardstock with a light ink. If I hadn't stamped multiple times, the white wouldn't have shown up quite as bright on the dark cardstock unless I heat embossed with white. So if you are primarily using photopolymer stamps, a stamp positioner is essential if you want crisp results like this. It doesn't have to be a MISTI. There are many brands. Even Sizzix has a stamping platform, but a stamp positioner will really elevate your stamping. That said, acrylic blocks absolutely still have a place in the craft room if you're creating a background with smaller stamps. For example, I used acrylic blocks to randomly create small stamp designs in different areas. Yes, you can do that with a stamp positioner, but you'd constantly have to reposition the stamp. With an acrylic block, you just stamp and go. I have multiple acrylic blocks in different sizes. Smaller blocks are especially useful for tiny stamps because they won't rock or create ghosting. So for stamping, a stamp positioner and a few acrylic blocks in different sizes are your best friends. I also use a sticky mat inside my MISTI. Mine is from My Sweet Petunia. It's a great tool for stamping small pieces of cardstock, but this isn't mandatory. The MISTI comes with a foam pad and a magnet. I bought a second magnet separately. There really isn't a smarter swap here because these tools are really basic and having them allows you to stretch your supplies beyond their obvious use. Let's talk about stenciling, and I'll club ink blending with it since we mostly require the same tools for both. I do use a lot of coordinating as well as standalone stencils, and I find it's an easy way to add visual or physical texture to my cards. This card was created using a background stencil and Astro Paste. If you watched my most recent 14 More Hacks video, you saw me shift and flip a stencil to create a secondary design on the background. This one wasn't originally a stencil. It was a die that I used to create a stencil. So there are lots of ways to stencil creatively if you love that technique. Now, how do you make stenciling and ink blending easy, convenient, and creative? The correct answer would be using a sticky mat, blending brushes and foams, and optionally a magnetic glass mat. This sticky mat is from Altenew and it's made of the same photopolymer material as the clear stamps. When you lay your panel down, it sticks beautifully and magically frees up your hands. This is my first $2 sticky mat from AliExpress. It's less sticky now after a lot of use, which actually makes it perfect for ink blending on vellum because vellum is very delicate and the low tack won't damage it. But the stick is still pretty good, as you can see. So even an older sticky mat still has its purpose. But if you are an absolute beginner and you don't have a sticky mat or a magnetic glass mat, you can tape down the card panel as well as the stencil to your work surface, which works pretty well, except it's a little labor intensive. When I stencil, I love combining my sticky mat with my magnetic glass mat. I should have remembered to clean my sticky mat since it's a little dirty on the back right now, which prevents it from gripping the glass mat well, but normally it stays completely in place. My magnets also help hold things down during blending, so a magnetic glass mat is an excellent tool for so many different things, including card assembly. For intricate stencils, you can use pixie spray so the brush bristles don't get under the stencil. I do own a bottle of it, but I find holding down the stencil lightly works well enough for me. I should have used a foam blender on this, but this Spellbinder's brush is really good and I'm quite confident I'll get a crisp blend. If you're looking for the list of supplies, I have affiliate links in my blog post, which I've linked in the video description below. If you use the links in case you decide to purchase any of these supplies, I will earn a tiny commission without any extra cost to you, but it will definitely help support my channel. So thank you so much if you decide to support me. And if you like watching my videos and find them helpful, I'd love for you to give this video a like and do subscribe to my channel. And if you want to join me for monthly craft along sessions, just click the join button that should appear on the screen somewhere. Look at how beautifully this turned out. And when removing your panel, don't yank it off. Curl the mat back onto itself and gently lift the panel to prevent curling. Now here's a smart swap option for a sticky mat. Gina K Designs has double background stamps that also double up as a sticky mat. You can stamp with it and use it as a sticky surface for stenciling and ink blending. And if I use this on my glass mat, it won't go anywhere and it relieves me of the need to hold on to it. The designs are beautiful, so you can have the best of both worlds. That's a very smart swap if you want a tool that does double duty. These are extremely popular and are frequently out of stock, so keep a lookout, and I have a link to these in my blog post. Now let's move on to die cutting. Almost every card I make includes die cutting. Whether it's this card with all the detailed die cutting or these designs that combine multiple techniques, many of them still feature a significant amount of die cutting. You absolutely need a good die cutting machine that can cut through heavyweight cardstock, acetate, vellum, etc. My workhorse is the Spellbinder's Platinum 6. It doesn't come decorated like this. I customized mine with washi tape stickers. If you're new to card making, it's worth noting that your die cutting machine can be used for multiple techniques. Die cutting, embossing with embossing folders, as well as dies and stencils, and some non-Spellbinders machines will allow you to use it with the BetterPress system and also adding pressure to hot foil cardstock. It's incredibly versatile. I also now have the Spellbinder Scout machine in this beautiful lilac shimmer, which replaced my older Sizzix Sidekick machine, which wasn't applying even pressure, and I ended up wasting a lot of cardstock since the dies wouldn't cut through. I use this for smaller jobs and it's much easier to handle with my arthritic wrist. I also own a Vevor die cutting machine. It has a 9¼ inch opening, which is large and is more affordable than the Spellbinders and cuts beautifully. But the downside is that it's really heavy. So I only bring it out when I have a lot of die cutting to do or need to emboss sideways or something, because the larger opening really makes that easy. I have linked all of the tools I'm demonstrating today in my blog post, so you'll be able to find everything there in one place. And if something caught your eye today, using my affiliate links would mean a lot to me. Now, when it comes to die cutting and layering, there are a couple of key considerations. First, of course, is the machine. And second, of course, are your dies and making sure you're investing in good quality ones. When I first started card making, I bought quite a few dies from AliExpress because I wasn't sure how long I'd stick with the hobby. I didn't want to invest heavily right away. But as I started exploring larger, well-known brands like Spellbinders and others, I began to realize that some of those early purchases were actually knockoffs. And that's not something I felt comfortable supporting because I genuinely love and believe in the companies whose products I use. And I want to support their creativity and hard work. So you'll notice I still have several of those earlier dies that I've never even touched. I stopped once I understood what I had purchased. And that was definitely a learning moment for me. Brands like Spellbinders, Paintfresh Studio, Salmon Says Stamps, Scrapbook.com produce high-quality dies with clean cuts. Investing in quality saves money from wasted die cuts that didn't really cut well, and of course, time and frustration. For intricate dies, a tool-in-one is fantastic because it saves you so much time when you're trying to remove the negative pieces from the die cut and the die itself. It's best used over a foam pad when you're brushing, but you can also just use the pointy side to pop the bits out, and you can just hold the die at an angle for easier release with the brush. It's not a mandatory tool, but incredibly helpful for intricate dies. Now let's move on to embossing. I'll address both dry embossing and heat embossing in case you're new to card making because they are very different from each other and therefore require totally different sets of tools. For dry embossing, besides embossing folders, I also emboss with stencils and dies, and although they're a little more involved, they pretty much require the same setup as standard folders. I also use hot foil plates without heat and BetterPress plates without ink for embossing. But since I have full-length videos on those, I'll skip those topics and drop a link to those videos in the description. Basically, there are three essential tools for embossing. The embossing folder, of course, a good heavyweight cardstock, and a spray mister. I love using 3D folders more because they give much deeper definition than standard 2D folders, but I love using the standard ones for subtle background texture. You can definitely see the texture here. There's nice definition. But when you compare it to a 3D embossing folder, the difference is very noticeable. Let me show you a few. This one, for example, is a 3D embossing folder. Look at the depth and definition in the flower. Stunning details. There's so much more intricacy here, and it really stands out compared to a standard 2D folder. For most of my folders, I like to keep a swatch panel with them. I haven't created samples for every single one yet, but I do have them for most. Keeping the embossed panel stored with the folder helps me see and feel exactly what the design looks like when it's run through the machine. You can really tell how much definition there is, even though I used a lighter weight cardstock since the heavyweight ones are more expensive. This particular folder also comes with a matching cutting die, which is fantastic. You can use the die to cut out the shape first and then emboss it with the folder. Or you can emboss the entire panel and then layer additional elements in the center for more depth and definition. These provide so many options. So this is another type of embossing folder to consider. And if these are still available, I'll definitely link them in the blog post under the list of supplies. So those are the folders themselves, but there are a few very important things to keep in mind when it comes to embossing. The next thing is your cardstock. You can emboss lighter weight cardstock, something like 80 pounds could give you decent results, but the best results I've personally found are with heavier cardstock. My favorite are the 110 pound Nina Classic Crest and Nina Solar White. They emboss beautifully with fine detail, but work especially well with 3D folders. You can also use mixed media or watercolor paper. Anything with a bit more weight tends to perform much better. These samples here were made with thinner cardstock because, like I mentioned earlier, I didn't want to use up my more expensive paper for sampling. This one I believe is 100 pounds hammermill, and it gives a pretty nice result. But the heavier Nina Classic Crest definitely creates more depth and definition. Now, the second trick to getting more definition is misting your cardstock lightly with water before running it through your die cutting machine. In the early days, I used a regular spray bottle and it worked. But once I switched to a fine mister, I could see the difference. If you look closely, this one creates a very fine, even mist instead of blasting the cardstock with concentrated droplets of water in one spot, which causes parts of the card panel to get sopping wet and other parts remain dry. This is the distress sprayer and it produces a beautiful uniform mist. It lightly softens the fibers of the cardstock, which helps the embossing folder create the more defined impressions. Although if your cardstock isn't heavyweight to begin with, even misting won't fully fix that and the result can look a little half-baked. So if you're investing in embossing folders, especially the 3D ones that don't come very cheap, I highly recommend designating some good quality heavyweight cardstock specifically for them so you get the most out of the folders. The next thing you absolutely need is a flexible rubber mat like this one that's included with most die cutting machines. This rubber mat came with my Spellbinders Platinum 6 machine. The machine also came with an adapter plate, which is this plate D. My smaller Spellbinders Scout machine also came with a rubber mat and an adapter plate along with a slimline embossing folder. If embossing is something you do often, especially 3D embossing, these plates and mats are essential for getting proper pressure and clean results. Now, from time to time, you may also need a shim. Both of my Spellbinders machines came with a shim plate. If I need a little extra pressure, I can add that shim into my sandwich. And if your machine doesn't come with a shim, you can simply add a piece of cardstock or even folded up copy paper to increase the pressure. Shims are especially helpful when embossing with stencils. Stencils are much thinner than embossing folders, so they don't naturally create as much pressure. In my stencil embossing hack video, you'll see me use a scrap piece of heavyweight watercolor paper to build up that extra pressure. That thicker paper acts as a shim and helps achieve a deeper impression. So if you want really good embossing results, you need a rubber embossing mat, the correct adapter plate, and occasionally a shim for added pressure. My Vevor machine didn't come with either an embossing mat or an adapter plate. So when I emboss using that machine, I usually use the ones from my Spellbinders machine. I also have a Gemini die cutting machine. It does come with a silicone mat, but I rarely use it for embossing. The Gemini applies a tremendous amount of pressure, and I found that the silicone mats tend to tear after a couple of passes under the intense pressure. In fact, do you see what happened to mine? It literally split and tore from being run through the machine. I could repurpose these as glue mats, but for embossing, they just don't hold up for me. Plus, the risk of my cardstock cracking under that much pressure is really high and used to happen all the time. So that's honestly why I no longer use my Gemini for embossing. Now, there are a couple more bonus ideas for embossing. Like I mentioned earlier, hot file plates and even BetterPress plates without the ink. On this card, I used a hot foil without heat just to emboss, but full disclaimer, please do this at your own risk because hot file plates are not intended for embossing. However, nothing happened to the plate and it's completely intact and still works perfectly as a hot file plate. I just wanted to maximize my supplies and get more versatility out of them. And the same applies to this one here. I hot foiled the bottom half and embossed with the hot foil plate on the top. If you'd like to see different uses of hot foil plates beyond the standard hot foiling, I'll drop a link to that video in the video description so you can check it out. Now let's talk about the other type of embossing, which is heat embossing. You can see here that I've heat embossed in silver on regular cardstock and in gold on vellum, and both give you beautiful results, just slightly different looks. For me, the most essential tool for heat embossing is a good heat tool. If you enjoy heat embossing, this is something you absolutely need. The one I'm using is actually a very affordable heat tool from Amazon. I bought it years ago when I was doing a lot of mixed media. It's probably 6 or 7 years old now, but still works perfectly. There are other options out there. I know Ranger has a heat tool with multiple settings, and I believe Fiskars also offers one with 2 heat settings. But this simple one works just fine for me. I don't recommend using a hairdryer. First, it doesn't get hot enough, and it tends to blow the embossing powder everywhere since the airflow has a wider coverage. With heat embossing, the right tool does matter, even if your technique is great. Amongst embossing powders, I highly recommend having a lot of clear embossing powder besides silver, gold, and white. Ever since I discovered clear embossing powder, I think it was after watching Gina Kay or Jennifer Maguire demonstrate it, I stopped buying colored embossing powders. Clear embossing powder is so versatile because you can stamp with any ink color and then clear emboss over it. I still have a large collection of colored powders and a variety of gold and silver from Altenew, Ranger, and Gina K. You can always expand into specialty ones later, like this holographic one. I wouldn't recommend a black one unless you're doing black on black embossing, because if it accidentally sticks to an unwanted area on a lighter background, you're going to have black specks show up in your design. And now I consider this a total waste of money for the kind of heat embossing I do. So please keep that in mind. This Altenew Pure White embossing powder is a really bright and crisp white, and I love it. This here is actually an ultra high embossing powder. When a powder is labeled ultra high, it just means that the granules are chunkier, so you'll get a thicker, more dimensional finish when it melts. Now, while specialty powders are fun, if I had to simplify it for beginners, I would say start with a good heat tool and a small collection of quality embossing powders in clear, silver, gold, and white. You absolutely don't need any more than that. And the anti-static pouch, which is actually critical for a clean embossed background. If you love making interactive cards as much as I do, then this segment is for you. An interactive card is basically anything the recipient can move, open, pull, or engage with in some way. For example, this one here is an interactive gift card holder. You can pull this in and out, and the flower acts as a stopper. That simple mechanism makes it interactive. This one is another interactive design that I absolutely love. When you open it up, there's that beautiful colored panel inside. It has layered elements in heat embossing, so again, there's movement and a reveal. This one actually isn't interactive. I'm not sure why I put it here, so we'll just ignore that one. These three here are shaker cards, and you can probably tell I love making shakers. This one is a fun fold that stands up as an easel card, so again, interactive. Same with this one. You can prop it up and it displays upright. This one here has a surprise reveal inside with beautiful embossed vellum on top. So again, there's an interactive element because the recipient discovers something as they open it. And then this one, you actually have to untie the string, open one flap, and then open another. There are multiple steps before you get to the message. So interactive cards can mean shaker cards, easels, fun folds, pull tabs, hidden messages, anything that involves movement or surprise. Now let's talk tools. There isn't one specific interactive card tool, but if you love making fun folds and cards that require precise scoring, then a scoring board is absolutely essential. I have the smaller scoring board that I use all the time. It's perfect for standard card sizes. But for larger cards like this one, it becomes limiting if I want to score from corner to corner, which is why you see this tape here. And you can check out my 14 more hacks video I've linked in the description to see why I've added that. So for larger panels or more complex fun folds, this one simply won't work. So I have two additional options. The first is a larger scoring board. This one includes both a cutting blade and a scoring tool, and you can even make envelopes with it. I don't use it every day, but it's incredibly helpful for larger panels and diagonal scores like this one here. If you enjoy larger fun folds or interactive designs that require big score lines, a large scoring board makes a huge difference. Now, the second option is actually using a wire trimmer as a scoring tool. Let me show you how that works. This is technically a trimmer, but instead of using the cutting blade, I'll move it out of the way and use the cutting track as a scoring groove. The wire guide helps me line everything up precisely, and I have demonstrated the scoring hack in the same video I alluded to a second ago, so do check it out. This works beautifully if you already own this style of trimmer. Now, I will say that with my larger scoring board with a built-in trimmer, I get frayed edges when I trim heavyweight cardstock. I don't want to sand edges or trim them down again. So I eventually invested in a larger guillotine-style paper cutter for my 12 by 12 paper. Since I love making square cards, I needed something that could handle larger sheets cleanly. So if you love making fun folds and interactive cards, you'd need a scoring board, a larger one if you make bigger panels, and of course a scoring tool like a bone folder or stylus, a good trimmer, and optionally a larger paper cutter if you frequently work with 12 by 12 cardstock and pattern paper. There's no single interactive card tool like I mentioned, but precision scoring and clean cutting are absolutely essential. Let's move on to pattern paper cards. And I love making them. I've made a ton of them, and you can go back and watch some of my earlier videos to see just how often I reach for pattern paper. If you love working with pattern paper, one of the best investments you can make is a good set of nesting dies besides a trimmer and scoring tool. Here's why. If you just stick a piece of pattern paper onto a card base as one flat layer, it can look a little boring. It doesn't have depth or dimension. But when you start layering your pattern paper using nesting dies, it instantly becomes more polished and interesting. For example, this card is layered. Those frames and panels were created simply by using nesting dies. You can use them plain for clean layers, or you can use more decorative versions with detailed edges, all the frills and finishes depending on the look you want. I love using nesting dies from Coco Rosa Studio because they have such unique and unusual shapes, plus they offer a 25% discount code for my viewers. So check them out and use the discount code if you're shopping for nesting dies. You'll find the link in my video description. And pattern paper works beautifully for interactive cards too. I use circle dies to cut out elements from a pattern paper pad, but I turned them into round focal points using nesting dies. This background was originally just pattern paper. I embossed it, ink blended over it, and completely transformed the look. Then I layered it with die cuts and vellum. That added depth and interest, but again, a lot of that structure came from nesting dies. I also created this frame using a Spellbinder's pinking edge die. That's another example of a nesting die set. I used two sizes together to create the inner frame. Having those graduated sizes allows you to build frames easily without needing a separate frame die for everything. Now, you don't need every decorative edge under the sun. I recommend starting with 2 or 3 basic shapes like circles, rectangles, and squares, and maybe a couple of specialty ones. You can use them to mat panels, create frames, cut focal areas from pattern paper, and add layers to otherwise flat designs. I also have A2 matting dies that are perfect for cutting clean card panels. These are great for giving pattern paper a finished professional edge. So if you love making pattern paper cards, nesting dies are extremely helpful for creative outcomes. The second must-have is a good trimmer. This guillotine trimmer is from Tim Holtz Tonic Studios, and it's my workhorse. I use this about 99% of the time. It gives clean cuts, especially on heavier cardstock. If I need to make partial cuts or cut into the middle of a panel, then I'll use my Fiskars wire trimmer. That wire guide allows for precise, controlled cuts. For example, on this shaped edge card, I used the Spellbinder's nesting die to create the label shape. It was still attached after die cutting, so I placed it into my wire trimmer and carefully cut along the wire guide to separate just the areas I needed. That's where a wire trimmer really shines, for partial cuts and custom shaping. Now, if you use a lot of 12 by 12 pattern paper, especially if you make 6 by 6 cards like I do, you'll likely need a large trimmer that can handle full sheets cleanly. I don't use it on camera because it doesn't fit in the frame, so I usually pre-cut my paper off screen. But for larger sheets, it's very helpful. That said, and this is an honest moment, I also own a smaller trimmer that I thought I would use more often. I don't. It looked cute and trendy, but for me, it wasn't the smartest purchase. I always reach for my main guillotine instead. Let's talk about hot foiling. I think I showed you this card earlier. I used a hot foil plate to create this background. I actually have a few spare foil backgrounds like this lying around, and I love cutting them down into panels for other cards. For example, on this one, I used a Spellbinder's pinking edge die to cut out the center portion and turn it into a focal panel. I also used the hot foil plate for dry embossing, like I mentioned in the dry embossing segment of this video. I use the Gemini foil press for hot foiling. The Gemini foil press works in conjunction with my Gemini Junior die cutting machine and not my Spellbinder's Platinum 6 to complete the foiling process. Two other major hot foiling systems I'm aware of are the Spellbinder's Glimmer system and the Anna Griffin Empress Guild hot foil machine. I don't own either, so I can't speak from personal experience about them. But if you own one of these and have been using it for a while, please share your experience in the comments so others can benefit benefit from your feedback. Now, the Gemini foil press did come with accessories like finger protectors for lifting the heated platform, but to be honest, it doesn't get dangerously hot unless you're putting your fingers directly underneath or on top of the platform. So if hot foiling is something you love, it's worth researching the system that fits your setup and budget best before investing. Also, you do need good quality foil and really smooth cardstock to get great results because textured cardstock doesn't foil well. For the hot foil sheets, I use Spellbinder's Glimmer, and I haven't tried any other brands, but I can say the Glimmer foil has always worked beautifully for me. Good quality foil really makes a difference. I mostly foil on Neenah Classic Crest white cardstock since it's really smooth, but I also use Spellbinder's color wheel cardstocks that offer great results. There's an additional thing you'll need for hot foiling, and that is some kind of a heat-safe surface like a silicone mat to place your hot plates on when you remove them from the platform. Now on to BetterPress. I love BetterPress. I have a lot of press plates, and this little stack here is probably less than a tenth of what I own. What's great about BetterPress plates is that you can also hot foil with them. In fact, hot foiling results are often even better with BetterPress plates than with traditional hot foil plates. And as far as I know, Spellbinder's club kits now include plates that can both letterpress and hot foil, and you receive a roll of hot foil with it. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if traditional hot foil plates eventually phase out because BetterPress plates can do both. Here's another way to stretch your BetterPress plates. For this lacy border, I didn't actually letterpress the vellum. I used the BetterPress plate like a stamp. I inked it up, stamped it onto vellum, and then heat embossed it. So you can absolutely use your press plates as stamps. Now, if you don't own a BetterPress system, but you love embossing, you can dry emboss with a press plate in your die cutting machine using a rubber embossing mat and an adapter plate. I've done a video on it, and you can check the video description for a link to that as well. One thing though, I would not rely on running an inked press plate in your die cutting machine. The reason the BetterPress system works so well is because the plate sits on a magnetic platform and doesn't shift. Once it's in place, it doesn't move at all. In a regular die cutting machine, however, the plate can shift slightly during the embossing process. If that happens after you've inked it, you'll get ghosting. So if you want the true letterpress effect, there really isn't a substitute for the actual BetterPress system. So this might be a good time to think about what kind of card maker you are. Do you gravitate toward one technique more than the other? If so, focus on the essentials for that technique first. It's very tempting to buy all the fancy tools, but honestly, working with basics and essentials can actually make you more creative. When you limit your supplies, you challenge yourself to stretch them in new and interesting ways. And if you enjoyed this, I think you'll also love the video where I talk about 15 basic and also affordable paper crafting tools everyone actually needs. And you can watch it here.